Trump takes us from the, silly to the serious very quickly, because the people that do listen to Donald Trump are taking what he has to say very seriously. And every time he talks about Hillary Clinton should be in jail, that she's crooked, that she's dangerous, all of these things, there are people in those crowds listening who are actually listening and taking him very, very seriously, to the point where they are turning violent. Let's listen to this Trump supporter. I think it was in New Hampshire, I'm not exactly sure, and what he had to say to the Wall Street Journal.
How are you feeling right now about where things stand with the campaign?
I feel like Hillary needs to be taken out. If she gets into government, I'll do everything in my power to take her out of power, which if I have to be a patriot, I will.
What does that mean?
Take it any way you want to take it.
I mean, that sounds like a threat.
Take a patriot is.
Is that a physical threat?
I don't know, is it? I won't have to myself. Well, there's going to be probably a movement to where we will go and take them out of power.
But it sounds like you're saying that it would be acceptable to assassinate a president.
If she's corrupt, why should she be able to stay in office? Answer that question.
Yeah, so we get from, he's rigged election, and we get from everybody should have drug tests, and then you hear these people, and I've seen them, and you've probably seen them in other places. But when they're saying things like this, because Donald Trump has sort of pushed into their minds the idea that this is an un-American person, and he is equating patriotism, this Dan Bowman, equating patriotism with taking out the president should
yes,
she
there's
win.
nothing more patriotic than
there's nothing
assassinating
more, right.
the
Then
president.
it might not be him. It might be a group of people that do it, is what he says. Where are we? How'd we get here?
I mean, there's a place for a role model, and he's just not it. Whether he wants to admit it or not, he is the one who has been nominated to set the agenda moving forward for an entire one of the two main political parties.
Right, and we should say the man you're talking about is a man who Paul Ryan has not unendorsed, a man that Mitch McConnell has not unendorsed, a man that Marco Rubio has not unendorsed. So all of the Republicans within that operation, Reince Priebus is working for this guy's election, and then there's that.
And hearing this, and hearing what it turns into within individuals. Now, one person does not represent an entire group of folks, but one person could do what it is very obvious to me this person is threatening to do. Now, those people exist without stoking the flames of saying, only Second Amendment people can stop Clinton.
Right.
It's just a continuation of the violent rhetoric that Trump started at his rallies, telling them to kick people out and hit him in the face and all this stuff.
Right, and this illegitimate thing that you're referencing that started at his rallies, it actually started a long time ago. It was Republicans saying that Bill Clinton should not have been president. He wasn't entitled to the presidency. That Barack Obama, this came from Trump, or was perpetuated by Trump, Barack Obama was un-American, not entitled to the presidency. Then you see these guys. And, at that same rally, Dan Bowman, who we just heard from, Matt Visor of the Boston Globe, who you should follow, who's a really, really good writer and has covered this election really well. Matt Visor said, this is number 9, said that this is in his interview, Dan Bowman saying, if she's in office, I hope we can start a coup. She should be in prison or shot. That's how I feel about it. We're going to have a revolution and take them out of office if that's what it takes. There's going to be a lot of bloodshed. You can be sure that Dan Bowman, who's giving his name to everyone, is going to get a visit from the Secret Service. But it's, it's this whole idea. Now, fine, all right, you hear that, and you're going to hear this kind of rhetoric in elections. But Donald Trump isn't repudiating this, right? Yeah. I mean, even at John McCain's rallies, when people said things about Barack Obama, right? I mean, that he would say, no, he's an American. He loves his country. He's running for president, right? And John McCain couldn't stand Barack Obama. He didn't want him to win. He was running against him. Donald Trump has not repudiated any of these people ever. He's not repudiated the people that fought at his rallies during the primaries. He's not repudiating these guys who are calling for violence. It's astonishing to me. And even, he did this, and I don't know if we're covering this in the second hour or not, but I'll mention it, the firebombing of the Republican headquarters in North Carolina, he right away blamed that on Hillary Clinton, right? He went and blamed that on Hillary Clinton and her people. Hillary Clinton sent a tweet out saying, I'm praying for everyone. I'm so happy that everyone's safe. This is a horrible thing for the Republican Party. So the decency factor, completely out of politics with Donald Trump.
And this is speculation, but take what Matt Bauman said.
Yeah.
And
no, that Dan
Bauman. Sorry, what Dan Bauman said, and if it's not Dan Bauman, if it's someone who's Muslim,
right?
Dan Bauman would say, "Get that? Why is that person who is able to say that not in jail right now?"
Right.
And maybe not from his mouth, but I've seen it tons of other places where people say, I mean, folks who are trying to come in who have committed no transgressions, and are refugees.
Yeah.
Still being able, if someone who was even remotely affiliated with that category said the same thing, would you be calling them a patriot? I mean, the word patriot, he says, what do you think a patriot is? Well, what does this guy think a patriot is? Because what he thinks a patriot is not a patriot.
The guy who puts a U.S. flag do-rag on his head and starts saying that he wants to kill Hillary Clinton. That's a patriot.
Oh
yeah, he had that
like
thing.
The foam.
The foam it's a Donald Trump mask, so that if he pulled it down, it was a Donald Trump.
Right, the same person who's like, why when they're wearing those Islam hoodies?
Right.
I can't see your face. How come you're allowed to do that and I can't see your face? Oh, I'm sorry. So now vote for Donald Trump. And you just see this. How big are the eye holes for Donald Trump masks when Donald Trump's eyes are already so tiny and beady?
Small eyes, so.
Right. And that guy's a moron, too, because, you never saw a Klan guy interview. It's like, so I think, that just didn't happen. So
it seems like he's trying to get fired from his job.
Well, I think it's worse than that. I mean, I think it's going to be worse than that for this guy. I'm sure he's being investigated.
Legal repercussions.
Well, legal repercussions and Secret Service watch lists and monitoring and all the things that come with making a threat on a former Secretary of State, a former First Lady at this point. Even if she's not going to be president, she still has Secret Service protection.
Be on the no fan vote list.